We've got four new celebrity documentaries to talk about, and they feature some of the most beloved figures in both acting and music: Christopher Reeve, Gene Wilder, Bruce Springsteen, and Celine Dion. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my movie review for four celebrity documentaries. I try to do these kind of doc roundups a couple of times a year. There's so many celebrity documentaries out there. A lot of them, go directly to streaming. They maybe 10 or 15 years ago would have been, TV specials or whatever. But some go theatrically or go to film festivals, etc. And so we're going to take a look at some of those. And some of my videos, I will do like one documentary in a specific video. Like just the other week, I did Piece by Piece with Pharrell Williams as the subject. That was like the Lego style Pharrell documentary. You can check that out. But I thought, look, that got a nice theatrical run on its own, so I'll give that its own video. But these, not that they don't deserve their own videos, but I think we can talk a little more quickly about some of these. Before I launch into the specifics of them, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are one of my subscribers already, thank you so much for returning. If you're not, though, please consider subscribing. Click the notification bell. That, of course, would be awesome. But you could just like this video or comment below, too. That helps the channel tremendously. All right, so let's start with Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. And this is Super/Man. So obviously, kind of keying off his famous character, Superman, but also calling him a super man. And this was directed by Ian Bonhote and Peter Etigui. And with these documentaries, I will tell you the directors. I always like to do that. But I will say that these directors, for these particular films, I really don't know much about. I looked at some of their filmographies, and their names, and movies were not familiar to me. So, all kind of newbies here. But in any event, I'll let you know about them. So this is all about, obviously, the actor Christopher Reeve, who played Superman for many years. But then in the 90s, had a paralyzing accident with a horse, and left him, paralyzed the rest of his life, and left him as sort of a kind of bastion for, handicapped accessibility and research into spinal cord injuries and all of that. So this movie takes a non-linear look at his life. It doesn't start out, okay, he was born here, then he did this, then he did this, then he did this, and then he had the spinal injury. No, we learn, right away in that first scene of this movie, if you were unaware of who Christopher Reeve was or whatever, and maybe younger viewers may not be at this point, but we learn right away that he became paralyzed, and then we kind of go back and forth between, post-accident and his acting career and his, life pre-accident. And boy, oh boy, this is a touching documentary. If you're not shedding some tears by the end, I'm not sure what to say. I mean, this is gripping. It is in some places tough to watch. It really is. And we see interviews here with his children. His wife, unfortunately, also did pass, his widow, just a couple of years ago. But she is present in some archival footage as well. Look, luckily, with the celebrity documentaries, we always have a big wealth, at least if they're in the modern era, we have a wealth of archival footage on talk shows and interviews and red carpets and whatever. So here, Dana and Christopher Reeve went on Oprah to talk about it, and there's some other interviews in that vein. And as well, you have some of his contemporaries in current day interviews, such as Glenn Close and Whoopi Goldberg, both who worked with him post-accident. He sort of, he did do a couple of acting jobs after his accident, including a remake of Rear Window, but he focused more in terms of the industry on directing. And so he, directed some of these folks. And Robin Williams, I did not realize this, but him and Robin Williams were immensely close friends, very, very close. And Robin spoke at his funeral, and all of this, and in a really kind of sad moment at the end. Glenn Close talks about how she truly believes that if Chris was still alive today, Robin would still be with us. I didn't realize that there was a big relationship there, but certainly age-wise, it makes sense. They'd be coming up kind of in the industry, and the movie talks about that a little bit. But boy, what a great film of a show of resilience and what you can do if you are forced to from a bad situation, making the most of that and helping others in that way, and that's certainly something that he dedicated his life to after his acting career was more or less over. And I must admit, I've only actually seen a couple of Christopher Reeve movies. I don't even think I've seen any of the Supermans in full. I've certainly seen a lot of the first one. It was kind of always on in my house growing up. I never sat down and watched it start to finish, but I've seen probably most of it, in passing. But I saw actually some of his other movies. I saw one of maybe his last movie before the accident, which was Village of the Damned, because Kirstie Alley was in it, and I was a huge Cheers fan, so I went to see that, and it was okay. But I think that might have been his last film, before the accident. But in any event, this is a really, really touching documentary. It's super well done, and I really appreciate that it focused probably more on his activism and his mindset post accident rather than, okay, here's what he accomplished in his career. Because I think, he wanted his legacy to be about his activism and what a strong person he was, and look, his children calling him heroes, and in many senses, not in the superhero way, but he really was sort of a superhero, in his own way. And the movie really, really highlights that. I think it's very, very well done. Easily the best documentary of this bunch, but one of the best documentaries I've seen, especially on a celebrity, in quite a while. So I leave Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, with an A. Let's move next to the other acting documentary I have, which is Gene Wilder. This premiered on Netflix in June. It did have a small theatrical run in March of this year, but this premiered for everyone to view over the summer. And this was directed by Ron Frank, again, a name I'm not familiar with, but it was produced by Julie Nimoy, and she is the daughter of Leonard Nimoy, so certainly a name that we know there. But this is all about Gene Wilder and his life and career, and he had Alzheimer's later in life. He stopped acting those last few years, and we do learn about that a little bit later on in the movie. But this takes a very conventional biopic nature. We go pretty much in chronological order here, from a little bit about his upbringing, but mostly we kind of start with some of those big movie roles, with the Mel Brooks stuff, and moving into Willy Wonka, and even up to the Will and Grace era, where he had a few episodes as a guest star as Will's boss, and we have interviewed clips with Eric McCormack talking about that. But the clincher here is Mel Brooks. And I had heard that this was, or I read, I should say, that this was, kind of put on pause during COVID because they really, really wanted to get Mel Brooks as an interview subject. To talk about his relationship with Gene Wilder. Obviously, three of the most famous Mel Brooks films, the producers, Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles, all had Gene Wilder, and he talks about how he had to fight for Gene to get some of those roles. And Willy Wonka obviously has taken on a life all its own. It's one of the most popular family movies of all time. So look, this is a very, very beloved figure, and it dabbles a little bit once we get into the 80s portion, about his relationship with Gilda Radner, which she had her own documentary maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer than that, but that was from CNN Films, and I really enjoyed that. I read her book in high school after she had passed, I think it's called It's Always Something, mostly about her career, but also about her cancer and dealing with that. And I didn't know much about her really until I read that book. So I knew kind of about her, and then I saw the documentary with her. So I was okay that this movie did not focus really a ton on their relationship and more really about his career. But once we hit the 80s, it also gets into the stuff with Richard Pryor, a lot of their team ups in the film, and they speak to his daughter, Rain Pryor, about that. But yeah, Mel Brooks really, I think, is the clincher here, because talk about gravitas, and he really is one of the people who gave Gene a huge start by casting him in The Producers. And we also have archival audio footage from Gene Wilder's audio book that he did the narration for. So we have, a lot of that. And that's pretty common, I think, these days with documentaries, seeing as how in the last I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years, audiobooks and now, Kindles and stuff have been so popular that you could listen. And a lot of people that wrote autobiographies are reading their own personal stories. So we get a lot of this kind of archival audio footage with documentaries where people have passed away. Look, this is good. But it's very, very sort of standard biopic stuff. Yes, there were some interesting nuggets here, things that maybe I did not know. Certainly great seeing some classic clips of him. And they interview actually the kid from Willy Wonka, Charlie, that played Charlie Bucket. I forget his name now, but that was his only film credit ever. He got out of the business after doing Willy Wonka, and he talks very fondly about Gene's methods and how they never necessarily knew what he was going to do or say, because sometimes he would go off script, and that was a little bit jarring because he was a kid and didn't know the business and whatever. But that was kind of fun to hear. But look, none of this is like groundbreaking stuff. Gene Wilder's certainly a beloved figure, and this is worth a watch. But it's just very, very standard celebrity biopic stuff, especially going from birth to death, and kind of talking about that. And there was one sort of weird portion towards the end also, where his doctor came on and talked specifically about things that he was going through, and I feel like maybe his widow could have, gotten that information out without, I don't know, it seemed to kind of betray to me like a HIPAA thing. If Gene had Alzheimer's, I don't think he could legally or reasonably sign off on, yes, doctor, you can talk about my stuff in very, specific detail. I don't know. That left me with like a weird feeling. I don't love that, but in any event, it's a slight recommend for me, but very, very standard. I leave Remembering Gene Wilder with a B minus. Let's move to the music stuff. Let's talk about this one first because it is very recent. It just went up on Disney Plus and Hulu within the last couple of weeks, and that is Road Diary, Bruce Springsteen and the East Street Band. And this is a documentary that chronicles really the 2023-2024 Springsteen World Tour, and sort of behind the scenes with that. But it really is more than that. It's a crash course kind of in the history of Springsteen on the road, and a little bit about forming the E Street Band, but mostly about their lives on the road, dating back to those early days in the nightclubs in New Jersey in the 70s. And so we have interviews with Stephen Van Zandt and Max Weinberg, and some of the still standing members of that original E Street Band. Clarence Clemens, the saxophonist, of course, he has passed away, but his nephew does the saxophone now, and so they interview him as well. This was directed by Tom Zimney, and his credits really are all sort of Bruce Springsteen related. He's done a few different Springsteen docs, and I don't believe he did one that I saw years ago. About 10 years ago, there was a documentary about the fandom of Bruce Springsteen's, and how these people go all over the world or all over the country, seeing his shows, year after year, and this is my 100th show, and introducing their family members to the shows and all of that. And it was cute. It was something a little bit different, focusing on the fandom rather than the star himself. But this is certainly about the touring life of Bruce Springsteen. We weren't looking at the songwriting. We weren't looking at any of that. But what I thought was interesting is, I've seen Bruce Springsteen twice. Back in, I think, 2010, maybe the first time, maybe a little before that. And then I did see him on the first leg of this tour. So, about 15 years apart. But what he's known for is these, huge 3-hour concerts. In fact, he's sort of credited, for better or worse, with these 2+ hour concerts. Paul McCartney joked one time that, his shows used to be about 45, 50 minutes. And then Bruce Springsteen came around and just started playing for hours and sort of set this new standard. So we have him to thank maybe for longer concerts, which I am okay with. But the gist of his old shows was that it was kind of anything goes. We would take a look into the catalog and play whatever I felt like that night, and whatever worked with the band. We do a cover here or there suggested by the crowd. But for this tour, it was very, very strict in its format. They had, songs that they wanted to get to in a specific order. There's a new album out, so we want to play, these specific songs mixed with some of the old favorites. And I thought that was an interesting choice when I saw him a year and a half ago, because I was like, I was looking at some of the other set lists and they were all the same. I thought maybe one song in the middle was like different. I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So what this movie does is take a look song by song. They go in order of the songs and talk about why that song, is sort of important at this portion of the concert, and then kind of take it back to the older days and say, okay, what does this have that reflects our former careers, not former careers, but our 70s and 80s, touring life and that kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting that they did the movie in order kind of the songs on the set list, and sort of talked about each one as they went. I definitely think that's an interesting way to do it. But look, of all of these documentaries, I will say this one is the for the fans only kind of documentary. Like, Bruce Springsteen's not my number one band or anything. I like the guy. Like I said, I've seen him twice in concert. He's certainly good. I'm not a huge devotee of the boss. But this documentary, I think if you don't really like Bruce Springsteen, this is going to do nothing for you. Some of these other documentaries obviously focus on some other things, like Christopher Reeve. Even if you've never heard of him, you could certainly get a lot out of that documentary about his fight and everything. Here, I think unless you are a really big fan of Bruce, which, look, luckily for Disney Plus and Hulu, who put the documentary on, there are millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of fans of Bruce out there that will enjoy this if they watch it. But for the uninitiated, I think this is going to just be kind of a miss for you. I don't think you'll really get much out of it at all, because it is so hyper-focused about the songs themselves and then the band themselves. If you're interested in music in general and see how touring works for, a worldwide big band, okay, then sure, maybe there'll be some interest for you there, for the touring portion of it. But yeah, I don't know. But I liked this movie enough because I am enough of a fan. I leave Road Diary, the Bruce Springsteen, what's it called? Road Diary, the Bruce Springsteen something or other, with a B. All right, so let's end with I Am Celine Dion. This premiered in theaters, had a limited run there, but it is on Amazon Prime. It came on there this summer, and it is really about her life and career, but also another battle with a debilitating physical illness, and hers is stiff person syndrome. So there's definitely, that's why I kind of wanted to bookend it with Christopher Reeve over here in Celine Dion, because this is also about a very famous person, famous for one thing, and then something happens to her physically, in which it is a struggle for her to continue performing. So, the start of this goes a little more linearly than the Christopher Reeve documentary. Certainly, we start out, in the early days and how she got her, career start singing these Canadian songs. She's French Canadian, and so singing these French songs, and then moving into some of her more, powerful ballads and all of that. But, of course, she is still alive and still with us. So most of these interviews really are about her specifically. I think they do talk to her son maybe a little bit, but there's also some home video footage, of her and her kids and whatever. I wouldn't say even home video footage, because it's certainly like staged, I guess, in a certain way. But this was directed by Irene Taylor. I was not familiar with any of her former documentaries, but she has won some documentary prizes. I think she has a Peabody Award for one of her docs from years ago. But yeah, this is a really, really raw look into this disease, stiff person syndrome, which affects 1 or 2 people in a million. And, obviously, Celine has always had the voice of a one in a million, but now she's got this disease that effectively, has sidelined her whole career. And she can still sing to a degree, but it is, sometimes painful. And she had one of these hugely powerful diva voices, right up there with Whitney, Aretha, Mariah. She could hold her own with any of them. And, to have this befall her obviously is, a tragedy for her and her life, and, of course, all of her fans. She did that very famous Vegas residency for years and years, and this ended up cutting that short. And we see the raw intensity of getting help for this syndrome. Towards the end of the movie, there are some scenes of her like getting these shots that she needs to get, and she is just screaming in agony, and it is at times hard to watch, knowing how much pain that she must be in. And at one point, I don't know if it's the director, but somebody says, do you want to stop rolling? And she says, no, no, keep it in, whatever. Because I think she wanted everybody to see, what she was going through. And this is a person who, and she even says this in the documentary, all I know is singing. If I can't sing, if I can't entertain people, what am I? And that's why it's called I Am Celine Dion, because she obviously is still a very intelligent person and a very nice person and all of this. But if she can't sing anymore, what does that do mentally for her? And that's something that Christopher Reeve dealt with as well, and we saw that in his movie. So that's why I wanted to kind of bookend these reviews with those two, because they're both the most intense of the documentaries, and more than just okay, here's a look at this person's career. No, this is about certainly their careers too, but the pain and struggle post these illnesses. The spinal cord injury for Christopher Reeve, and the stiff person syndrome for Celine. So this is another, big tear-jerking documentary, I think. I don't think it's as well put together as the Christopher Reeve one, if I'm being honest, but another really, really good one to check out, whether you're a Celine Dion fan or not. Maybe you're sick of the Titanic song or whatever, but check this out, even if so, because it definitely dives in a lot more than just her music career, for sure. So I leave this one, I Am Celine Dion, with an A-. All right, so 4 documentaries to check out. Look, all of them are at least positive grades. I think the Gene Wilder one, definitely a little more generic in terms of documentaries, and the Bruce Springsteen one, I think, is more for the fans only. But 4 to check out if you're interested, and you can I'm sure the Christopher Reeve one will be streaming soon. I think it's still in select theaters. I just saw it a couple of weeks ago in the theater, so I'm sure that'll be streaming soon. But the other ones, like I said, Gene Wilder on Netflix, Bruce Springsteen on Hulu and Disney Plus, and Celine Dion on Amazon Prime. All right, thank you so much for watching. Dan Reviews It, and I will see you next time.